Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew: Keith Johnson,
to your planet, welcome.
Alan Seiler.
Oh, I'll have Mr. Adventure eating out of my hands, sir.
And Veronica Dashel.
Hi. I don't know why that's always so hilarious. That's what I say every single time.
That's why it's hilarious.
And as you might have guessed, tonight we'll be talking about Star Trek III, which has celebrated its 40th anniversary this year. But first, Keith, do we have some This Week in Trek this week?
Yeah, there's some history that's actually relevant to the movie, which is why I found it. So I'm going to run through this quickly because this is a heck of a movie, and we got a lot to talk about. So 15th of September, 1965. I thought this was really cool. Everybody who's a big Trek fan knows that the models and the design of the Enterprise was all over the map. I have seen early stuff that said the original Enterprise as proposed by Matt Jeffries was actually upside down from what we now see it, which I think, and I've seen the early drafts that's true, and I can't imagine that. But what's important is on September 15th, 1965, the first Enterprise, as we now know it, was actually filmed for test film. And there was discussion about, does this weird looking ship work? And they debated. And I think you guys know that one of the early models too was the one with the big sphere in the front that looks almost like the Discovery from 2001. There was still debate about that. They filmed this one, and Roddenberry and company said, okay, let's go with it. And Gene still said, shouldn't you flip it the other way? And now probably one of the most iconic spaceships in history, maybe the most iconic.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. One more. This is also cool. 1967. When it's September, you're going to get a lot of these. The first time forever aired, do Vulcans have sex? Do Vulcans get married? What's mating like on Vulcan? And you know what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Amok time.
Right.
And of course, you got to go back to think about the first time you see this. And the show starts with Spock, with McCoy telling Jim, I'm a little concerned about Spock. Kirk's blowing him off. And the next thing you know, Chapel comes running out screaming, and Spock is throwing a bowl of soup across the hallway. What must that have been like when people first saw that? Like, what is going on with Spock?
Right.
Classic one. Okay, same date. That's so cool. 15th September, just jump forward 6 years. 1973 was the premiere of what most people consider to be the best of the animated series episodes. Spock goes through the Guardian of Forever and meets himself as a child.
Yeah.
Yesteryear. I got three more to go. This one is really important. 17th, and I'm jumping the date for on purpose, 17th December 1976, after a huge letter writing campaign and call-in campaign, the space shuttle, the first space shuttle developed by the United States under Jimmy Carter, was named the Enterprise. And I remember it was such an exciting thing for that to happen. And now, of course, when you look at all the Star Trek series, there's this continuing thing where some kind of a revolutionary new ship is named Enterprise. Wouldn't it be cool if going forward in real life they kept doing that? Like,
that'd be amazing.
Yeah, would it be cool? It kept naming things the Enterprise.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
The crappy thing is that the first model was named Enterprise, but it was the non-flying one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they probably would have named one of the fleet the Enterprise, but fans wanted the first one named it, and that's the first one that doesn't go into space. Thanks a lot, fans.
Right.
I know how Alan feels about that.
Yes. Okay, two more real quick. On the 19th of September, 1968, there's only one way to say this. You are not Morg. You are not Iborg. And we know what that is. That was the debut of arguably the best episode of Star Trek, which is Spock's Brain. One of those which is so bad it's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fun. At the very least, it's fun.
Well,
absolutely.
I wouldn't say it's good, but it is fun.
Right. It is absolutely fun. And then the last one, I saved this for last. And on the 16th of September, 1982, a story outline was presented with a lot of trepidation because the first movie, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, had not been beloved by fans. So the new outline for the next movie was submitted, and it was called Return to Genesis. And that was the first name. And of course, the rest is history with there. That's this week in Star Trek history.
Awesome.
Excuse me, third movie. I said Return to Genesis.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think The Search for Spock is a better title than Return to Genesis.
Oh, yeah, of course, because it gives you a known hook.
Right.
It ties it to the most beloved character in the show.
Yeah. So
and there was some rumor about whether Nimoy was going to leave, and not do any more Star Trek.
Absolutely.
So the fans were searching for Spock too, because they were like, I hope we find him.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's funny now how big a deal that was for Spock.
Yes.
Because obviously now it has less of an impact when you watch it now. I think it's emotional to watch, but we all know Spock comes back, and then not only does Spock come back, but Spock gets rebooted a couple times, played by different actors. Like there's a lot of Spock right now.
There's a lot of Spock.
Yeah.
Let me get a couple of comments that pertain to what we were just talking about. Matt Sweatman says, I don't want Elon Musk naming any of his ships Enterprise.
No, thank you.
And Wayne says,
Wayne?
the Marine Corps band played at that Enterprise ceremony 8 years before I served there.
Oh,
that's very cool.
That is.
And Matt is now asking about the weird blinging that's happening on somebody's audio. So
yes, someone keeps getting a notification of some kind.
Ah, crap! That may be me. I hope not. But let's see.
I think it's you, Keith.
Yes.
Sorry, Al.
Okay, Keith, I'm going to text you right now, and we'll see if it makes the blinging noise.
Just in case I thought it was, I just silenced my phone, which was supposed to be silenced, but I think
it sounded like a doorbell, which is weird.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
So Search for Spock.
Wow.
Yeah, we rewatched it this week in anticipation of this episode. I've seen it, I don't know how many times over the course of my life. Let's get some opinions. I know, Keith, you've got some pretty strong opinions about the Search.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
What, Keith with strong opinions? I can't even pick that.
For those that just missed the visual, if you're listening to audio, Mark commented that it's always Keith.
Yeah. And I work in IT too. That's the crazy thing about it.
So Keith, what do you think about the Search for Spock?
I love this movie. It is for me, far and away the best of the original series movies. I like it way more than Wrath of Khan, although I love the Wrath of Khan. I've always thought about it like the trilogy that those movies made: Star Trek 2, Star Trek 3, Star Trek 4. Obviously, Star Trek 2 is about vengeance and sacrifice with Khan. Star Trek 4 is about redemption because they go to Earth, and also I would say reclamation, because Spock really finds himself again. I love the Search for Spock because it's about loyalty. And it's about love. It is. I don't know if any of y'all did this, but I saw this movie when I think Charles and Alan, you probably did see it in theater, right?
I'd have been 3.
Oh, so no.
So if I did, I would have not behaved.
Okay. So Alan, you remember what it was like, because as you said, we didn't know if Leonard Nimoy was really coming back. All we knew for sure was that he was directing the show. And he didn't want to come back at first. There was a whole bunch of discussion about that. And so what you were saying, Charles, about the meaning of it, at the time this movie came out, I had been watching Star Trek for 12 years. And honestly, it's not a lie to say I probably watched an episode of Star Trek every single day for those 12 years. So when Spock died, I was crying. There were tears in the theater. And I will tell you, to this day, one of the best openings I've ever seen in a Star Trek film is that black and white opening with the little square, with the music and the whole thing with the death of Spock. I haven't watched this movie in probably 10 years. And I will tell you, at those points, I cried 3 or 4 times during this movie. I just love it. I love it.
You know, I've said before that my entryway into Star Trek was, even though I'd seen it, a little bit here and there growing up in the 60s, I didn't really get into it until Wrath of Khan. Friends of mine made me go see it in the theater with them. And I was like, I'm not interested in this, but I knew enough about the characters, I knew who they all were, so I had that sort of I already had sort of a link to them. But then there was Saavik, who was also new to Star Trek. So she became sort of like the character that I latched onto because we were starting this journey together. You know what I mean? And so that's really what made, by the end of that movie, I was invested enough that I cried at the Spock death also. And I'm like, I don't like this show. Why am I crying at this? But I was 100% hooked. So by the time Star Trek 3 came around, I was 100% on board. And as much as I loved Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock was something that, to me, at that point, I had just, started my journey as a Trek fan, and I had, I don't know, it was just like it meant something. You know what I mean? And I just loved it. And I was thinking about this today, actually. Also, as much time as we have spent in the last couple of years, with modern Star Trek, with Discovery and Picard and Strange New Worlds and Prodigy and Lower Decks and all that kind of stuff, every once in a while, it is just nice. It's comforting to go back to the originals. And for me, those 2 and 3 are the movies that started everything for me for being a Trekker from, that point on. And so there's something incredibly special to me about those 2 movies, particularly, and 4 also. I love 4 to death. But that's sort of like the acorn from which my tree has grown, my Star Trek tree.
Veronica, did you see it in theaters?
No. I was maybe conceived by the time this came out. I
thought you were going to say during.
That movie had that effect on a lot of people.
I love it.
No, I have a feeling it was my parents' honeymoon.
Okay.
This is how she was conceived, you said. Oh, I shouldn't do pornographic things like that on
So what did you think? You've seen it before, I know you have, because I showed all the movies to you in the past.
Yes.
And then you had a reaction when the movie started playing, and as Keith mentioned, the little black and white screen came up with the clips of Star Trek 2.
Yeah, I was like, what are we doing? Why are we watching this? I don't remember what I said, but I was
you were very surprised. You were like, why is it playing so small? Like, you thought the settings were wrong.
Oh, yeah. Because there's a little teeny tiny screen in the middle. I was like, who messed up the TV?
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's great.
What did you think of it? The movie?
I mean, I enjoyed it. I think from my limited memory of the other Star Trek movies, I feel like this one is the most Star Trek when I think of what's Star Trek, because it had people in space and doing spacey things, and it had adventure, and it had kind of like the heart of whatever Star Trek is, which I can't describe, but that's what it felt like.
Okay.
Well, what about you, Chuck?
I mean, I love all the movies. I grew up with these
know.
movies, and we had them on tape when I was a kid, so I don't know how many times. I mean, I don't remember a time when I had seen 2 but not 3. You know what I mean? I don't remember ever being surprised that Spock died. You know what I mean? Because I watched all these when I was so young.
Yeah.
But I love this movie. Now, if I had to rank it just as like a piece of cinema amongst the other Star Trek movies, I'd probably put it like 5th place amongst the other Star Trek movies. The original series movies. But I think it's super fun. I mean, I think this movie, it suffers, I think, most because it follows Wrath of Khan. Because Wrath of Khan is just like a great, even if you don't like Star Trek, Wrath of Khan is a classic. It's an 80s classic. You know?
Right.
This movie, I think, has more of a television feel than, say, Wrath of Khan or Star Trek 6. I think in part because Nimoy, I think, had primarily done television directing up to this point. But also it's very studio bound. You get a studio planet set that has a different feel than it would if they had gone on location or something.
Right.
They're fighting the Klingons, and they're running around on the Enterprise, and it leans very heavily into the relationships with the characters and sort of the fun of Star Trek. I think it feels more like a Star Trek episode. It even starts off with basically previously on Star Trek.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why it feels like the most Star Trek of the movies.
It's almost like in the 90s it would have been like, and now the conclusion.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. Because as I was watching it again this week, and I hadn't watched it in years, but when I was watching it this week, I was thinking, this really is a larger scale television episode.
Right.
Agreed.
And I feel
Agreed.
like that's the same thing that the next gen movies did. Less so with First Contact, but the other
Right.
ones all felt like they were just a television episode that was shown on a big screen. And that's kind of the feeling I got with this one, even though the scale in this one is definitely bigger than what they could have done on television. But still, it had that same feel to it.
Yeah. But it's awesome though. I mean, Captain Kirk throws on a leather jacket and steals the Enterprise to go save Spock. Kicks a Klingon in the face into a pool of lava. Like you know, or you can't go wrong.
Right.
Speaking
Exactly.
of that, you're talking about him kicking the Klingon. I'm thinking all that armor, and he didn't have a cup. The Klingon or codpiece.
Wow.
and I love it because I'm jumping way ahead. This show also, one reason I love this movie, it shows Kirk in all the Kirkiness that he has. He is clever. He is brave. He is loyal. And the man absolutely pulls crap out of a hat. I mean, the man can innovate like nobody's business. I mean, I love that Kirk, like, let's talk about Khan. In the original series, it's a meme that will never die. Kirk doesn't beat Khan in fair combat in the original series. He pulls that weird metal rod that happens to be in engineering and basically sucker punches him and beats the heck out of him. And then here, at one point, he has a branch and he's knocking the Klingon in the head with the branch, and he literally kicks him between the legs. I love it. I mean, that's Kirk. He's great.
Yeah, and the idea is to win the fight. You know,
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Okay, so some comments. Matt Sweatman says that the summer of '84 was a great season for movies. That is absolutely true. And he went to see a lot that year, including this one. Wow. Mark says that sometimes the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many.
Hold that thought, Mark.
And Matt says he saw 3 before he saw 2. Wow. So Matt, you have to tell us what your impression of the beginning of that movie was without having seen the thing that came before it.
Right. Absolutely.
You know, Matt says one thing that's really interesting, and I'm sure Alan remembers this. The year 1984 was a seminal year for movies and music. And so it was just an exciting time and for that movie to stand out as it did, Wrath of Khan, of course, it was just a great time at the movie. Steven Spielberg was at the height of his powers. And the music side, Prince was at the height of his powers. Kenny Loggins was still running around. It was a great time. So when I went to see this movie in the theater, just because there was so much going on outside of Star Trek fans, it was an event because people were just going to movies and stuff. So a lot of people were going just to see this movie.
And hey, since you mention it, I will just jump in and say that on my other podcast, Modern Musicology, we did an entire episode, and we did a 2-part episode about the music of 1984 and a separate show all about Purple Rain, and then a 4th show all about the Talking Heads Stop Making Sense, which all came out in '84. So go check those out.
That is awesome. that is awesome.
Okay, so another couple of comments that have just come in. Mark says, my dad taught me to win the fight any way possible. The winner writes the history book. And Matt says, I knew Spock had died in the second one. That was enough to follow the plot. Plus, the video of Spock and McCoy pretty much explained what we needed to know. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I wonder how many people had wondered, like, why was Spock putting his hand on his face in that scene? Or did they even show that originally?
No, they did. Okay. Yeah, that happens in Wrath of Khan.
So that was like there was a plan there already.
They left themselves an out.
They did.
Because they knew how popular Nimoy was.
Yeah.
So they killed him off, but they left away. And I'm sure, I mean, if I was a fan watching it in '82, I'd be like, coming out of the theater, seeing like, no, you see what Spock did? Spock's coming back. You know what I mean?
Dude, that is exactly what we did, Charles. Yeah. There were fights in the base, and if there'd been an internet, it would have gone on forever. Yeah. But yeah, we were talking about, because some people said, like you said, there was a studio thing going on, and people were saying, well, if Nimoy doesn't come back, all he did was give McCoy his memories, and that's kind of end of story. So we did not know what was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is the movie that really had figured out what people like about Star Trek. You know, it is the adventure, yes, but it's really the characters, and they really you get more of the characters and their dynamics in this movie than you had in the previous two. But even, I mean, and then in 4, they just sort of go all, it's just the characters, you know what I mean? 4 is like a sitcom with the characters.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I think When you say the character, one of the things that struck me about this movie is how good they are, because they have lived in these roles for years and they fit. And even Walter Koenig, who to my mind doesn't get enough to do in this movie, they all fit, and they have an ease with each other that I absolutely love. And also, I thought it was very interesting, the story arc of the show, because remember, this whole thing was Kirk as Admiral was not supposed to be commanding a ship. He was on an inspection tour with Sulu and Chekhov and Uhura. And so one of the things I noticed when they were sitting on the ship was how they looked too old for their positions. Not that they looked old, but Uhura and Chekhov sitting at those posts, they looked older than where they were, because that's not where they were supposed to be at this point. And then I remember, oh yeah, they were on basically a kind of a shakedown training cruise for younger people. And that's the ship they're still on. And with the cadets, the ones who survived.
Right.
It's talking about Walter not getting enough to do. One of the things that really stands out to me in this movie is how much Uhura is sidelined, like literally sidelined. And, you know, there was no reason why she couldn't have, you know, when she's in the transporter room with Mr. Adventure and she pulls the gun on him and he gets in the closet. There's no reason why she couldn't have pulled the gun on him. He operated the thing while she's on the pad and transports with them.
Or just set a timer on it.
What's that?
All they have to do is like set a timer
or
on the transporter. Like they can just say that it has that.
Right.
You know?
I mean, they can say whatever they want. You're right.
Right.
Alan, it's so interesting you said that. When this happened, Nichelle Nichols told the story. She gets her script in the mail for the movie. And she said, I did that thing that actors do. I open my script and I look for all the lines that have my name next to it. And she said, I was stunned and upset at how little I was in the script. She called Harv Bennett on the phone and she complained. She said, Harv, what's the deal? You barely have me in there. He tells her, Nichelle, I'm hurt. I'm crushed. It's not the number of lines. It's what you're doing. And then he tells her, read that scene again with Mr. Adventure that you just talked about. And he said that was such a pivotal part of the movie that, no, we really did right by you.
It is a pivotal part of the movie. Absolutely. Yeah. But there could have been a way for her to be in more of the movie. And I totally agree with her. You're going to look for your name and you're going to see it on 4 pages. And it is the amount of screen time you get. It's not just how pivotal the one scene you get. I mean, and it was a very important scene, but still.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like Shatner, all he had to do was kick the Klingon off the thing, and that we were like, oh, but this is a pivotal moment for the entire movie. This is how you win. He would have been like, bullshit, put me in more of the movie. Sorry.
Wow.
And it wasn't me this time.
I know. Alan's a bad influence. No, I mean that is a great scene with Mr. Adventure, though. But yeah, she very easily could have just jumped on the ship with the rest of them and gone on the rest of the adventure. I think they're at that point they're sort of running out of things for them to do, because once they go on the adventure, they're all just at their posts, and then they fly and find the Klingon ship, you know, and then beam down. Like, but I mean, I don't see why you. I mean, maybe it's because they had one less person to pay for those days. I don't know.
Maybe, but it's interesting that Saavik gets more screen time than Uhura does. And on that note, I think it's very important that we talk about the change in casting.
Yeah.
Because in 2, we have Kirstie Alley, who is introducing Kirstie Alley as Lieutenant Saavik. And then 1 movie later, we get introducing somebody else as Saavik. And you're like, is this like Murphy Brown's secretary and it's going to be a different person in every episode? But so what do we think about Robin Curtis taking over the role of Lieutenant Saavik?
I like both Saaviks.
I do too.
I prefer Robin Curtis. To me, I think she played it more like a Vulcan, but I think I don't know. I guess she kind of fits with the sort of TV episode feel of the movie, I think, whereas Kirstie Alley, I think her character is, because 2 is more cinematic to me in the look, the lighting, and the presentation. I think she fits it. I think they both fit their movie. But you had said that Saavik was your like sort of introduction character. So what did you think about the recasting?
You know, it's interesting because I wasn't that thrown by it. As much as I liked Saavik the first time around, I had no trouble acclimating to a different actor with a different portrayal. Right. And I do think that Robin sort of captured that Vulcanness maybe a little differently than Kirsty did. And I loved both of them. But I also, well, I was going to say, never mind. I'm not going to say that.
But
I like them both.
It's very interesting y'all say that, because that's what I hear a lot of hardcore Star Trek fans say, which is that Robin Curtis played more what they consider a Vulcan. And what I find interesting is Kirstie Alley, there was a little bit more emotion. Maybe, I don't know if she didn't get the same notes that Robin Curtis got. But one of the things is, given that Saavik was supposed to be half Vulcan and half Romulan, and it's also possible that Kirstie Alley was playing a little bit more towards the emotional side, and Robin Curtis was on the other side of that.
And that comes out in the novelization of Star Trek 2, right? So I don't know that was actually written into what we saw on screen,
right?
But I think it is a super interesting character design, and something that I wish they had explored more. And I kept waiting when Next Gen started. I kept waiting for Saavik to show back up as a captain, as an admiral or something, because she would definitely still be around, because she was young enough and early enough in her career that she would still be active in Starfleet had she not been killed or something like that. So I kept waiting for it. And then, if you remember, in season 6, the two-parter, Gambit comes up and guest starring Robin Curtis, and I'm like, oh shit! Sorry, Veronica's a bad influence on me. Holy cow! I'm gonna get Saavik, and so she's playing a different character, and I'm like, this is Saavik undercover. It has to be. Why would you hire Robin Curtis if it's not Saavik? Right. And then it wasn't Saavik, and I was so damn disappointed.
What did you think of her, Keith?
Which one, Robin Curtis or Saavik?
Yeah.
Yes.
I like her. Again, it was so weird because, as you said, I think they are both good in their roles. With Kirstie Alley, like when you see her kind of crying at the end with Spock's funeral, and the way she talks to Kirk early on when Kirk was talking about humor, and she says humor is not logical. She plays it just a little bit more emotional. Robin Curtis plays it a lot more stoic. Like the line that always kills me is when she said, Admiral, David is dead. Yeah. And there's just no emotion there.
Yeah.
And Kirstie Alley probably would have had a little bit more, but I really like Robin Curtis as Saavik. I thought she did a great job. And at the time it was tough for her because a lot of people liked Kirstie Alley, and frankly, back in the day, a lot of guys were like, oh my God, they thought she was just gorgeous, Kirstie Alley. So Robin Curtis got a little. Yeah, I thought so too. They got Robin Curtis got a little backlash at first, but I think people have come to, as you guys are saying, people have actually come to say they like her performance better. Yeah. And what's interesting is I've read this, and I just read this last week again from the people behind the scenes. Everybody says what happened was Kirstie Alley demanded too much money.
Yeah.
One guy I just read just last week, one of the people, they said she was actually asking for a salary up there with DeForest Kelley and William Shatner.
Sure.
And they're like, you got to get out of here. Are you out of your mind?
That ain't happening, lady.
we got Nimoy back. We don't need you anymore.
Exactly. Here's 3 comments from Matt Sweatman. The first one is, I agree that Uhura not traveling back to Genesis was a letdown. He also says, Robin Curtis feels more like the definitive Saavik to me, but that's entirely hindsight. And he says he felt the same as me about Robin Curtis in Gambit.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Wow. Well, on that note, I mean, we're at the halfway point, so let's take a quick break, and we'll play a promo or two, and then we'll be right back, and we'll continue searching for Spock. So stay right there.
Maybe we'll find him in the second half. Maybe. What am I going to play? Hang on. Oh, we'll do this one.
Look up. Look down. Look out. Here come the monkeys.
Mickey.
David.
Mike.
Peter.
We're talking about them in Monkeying Around. That's right. Monkeying Around has everything, including
Interviews.
Episode reviews.
Album discussions.
and other incredible surprises.
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
Hi, Hi, I'm Gina Shock from the Go-Go's, fabulous drummer of the Go-Go's.
Hi, this is Tony Levin of King Crimson.
Hi, this is David Fishoff of the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp.
Hi, this is Richard Evans. I am the author of Listening to the Music the Machines Make.
Hi, this is Teresa Kariakis, punk rock photographer.
Hi, I'm Tom Beaujour, author of Nothing But a Good Time, and you are listening to Modern Musicology.
Modern Musicology.
Modern Musicology.
You're listening to Modern Musicology, so, pay attention. You might learn something.
Awesome. Welcome back. Yeah, so Star Trek 3.
Star Trek 3.
Speaking of different stars, now you have to be of a certain age and have to have watched it at the time. But Commander Krug, for me, was Reverend Jim.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who know, he had a character on Taxi where he was a lunatic and he was way out there.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting when he was cast. It was almost like Michael Keaton getting cast for Batman back in the day. And so I did not know, because I'm used to Jim from Taxi. And was it Jim? Was it Jim from Taxi? Yeah.
Jim Ignatowski.
Yeah. And I thought he did a good job. I thought there was a couple of scenes where it was a little over the top, like the weird thing with the slime creature where he kills it and then he calls the bridge and say nothing happening here.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I thought he did a pretty good job as the Klingon. If there was any kind of over top to his acting, I think that was really more directing and scripting than actual Christopher Lloyd. Some people might think, well, that's the only way he can act, because there were subtle moments that I liked with him. Like there was little things like when he was sparring with Kirk, you see him lean back and kind of think for a second. He goes, "Yeah, I got some scientists on the planet below. I think I'll kill one of them."
Mm-hmm.
You can see he's very menacing. So I really like him as Commander Krug.
Yeah, I do too. And this is the movie that really establishes that second generation of Klingon, the ones that we sort of know from Next Gen. This is all really where it starts. And I think that he was a great template for the good Klingon commanders that come after him. And, I felt like his, having watched it again this week, his performance was a little more quote unquote human than I remember it being, but it was still super good. I loved it. And my favorite line of his still is they're like, somebody's calling us or whatever. And he goes, put him on the screen.
Yes.
I just think that's hilarious for some reason.
He plays it surprisingly straight for someone who's known so much for comedy. And I watched Taxi growing up, but by the time I was watching Taxi, Doc Brown had taken over. I mean, by that point, he'd already been in Roger Rabbit and Back to the Future and Dennis the Menace. I watched all that stuff growing up, so I knew him as Jim in addition to those other things, but I didn't know him as Jim watching Star Trek 3. But I mean, watching Star Trek 3 even now, and it does feel like he could have done more and they could have done more, knowing that it's freaking Christopher Lloyd playing this character, and he plays it. And I'm going to keep saying this, but he feels very much like a TV villain to me, where I mean, he really could have played it bigger or funnier or madder, or I mean, he could have been a Gowron, having him in that. But it could be that he was deliberately trying to do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. That he doesn't want to be comedy Klingon in Star Trek. He wants to be the Star Trek villain. Right. But I like it. I still like Commander Krug. He wouldn't be my favorite Klingon, but like you say, I like a lot of his. Similar to what they did with Nero years later, where it feels sometimes he just feels like a guy. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
But like I say, he could have been a Gowron, and I think that would have added a lot to the film.
I feel like him doing a Gowron, it would not have been like over the top Gowron. I feel like Gowron was not an over the top.
Gowron was just bigger,
yes.
But Gowron also I never really find menacing. So maybe that would have hurt the movie. Maybe I'm giving Nimoy bad advice on his direction from 40 years ago.
Yeah, but I tell you that at the time, seeing it in the theaters first run, he didn't feel like a television villain.
Okay.
He felt like this is something brand new. He felt like we know what Klingons were in the original series, and this is a whole new take on that. And it felt bigger than what you're than maybe what you're thinking of it now, because anyway, that's all.
Yeah.
So a couple of comments. Mark says Great Scott. Wayne says, I was waiting for Commander Krug to say, okie dokie. And Matt Sweatman says, I remember my brother coming over, having rented the VCR tapes of Never Ending Story and Star Trek 3. He kept quoting Taxi every time Krug came on screen.
Something that might be just universal is watching Star Trek with your brother is the worst. My brother's terrible to watch Star Trek with.
But Alan said something I think is very interesting, which is they absolutely did set the template for the modern Klingons. I don't know if they were really meaning to, but they established the subordinate officer pisses you off or argues with you, you killed him.
Yeah.
Because the dude who blew up the ship and he's like, I wanted prisoners. The dude says lucky shot, he kills him. And then the other guy was about to suggest it. He turns the pistol on him and he's about to shoot him.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because that guy speaks up and Krug whips out the gun. He says, say the wrong thing.
That's great.
That's like my favorite moment.
Torg is a good like lieutenant guy because he's like, I was going to suggest, sir, if it's prisoners you want, maybe even the scientist you're looking for. You know what I mean? He has that sort of thing where he's a little smarter than his boss. You know?
Actually, Charles, you're so funny you said that. I thought the same thing. He came off as somebody who's working with a boss who's kind of an idiot and temperamental, and he knows how to talk to him.
But he's not intimidated by pointing his gun. Obviously, this is happened before. Like,
well, sir, many times.
Wow.
Although Torg let me down at the end. Torg should have figured out that countdown. I commented on that while we were watching it. I was like, Torg is smarter than this.
Right.
Yes,
it's the only thing speaking. Let me hear it. You know?
Yeah, like you can't, even if you don't recognize the language in which the things are being said, you know what it sounds like. You know that rhythm.
Countdown.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So bad.
I will say something that struck me again watching this. I mean, you've got the Enterprise bridge, obviously, which is a holdover. They built that and it had been modified, but they built it for the motion picture and they're still using it. The new bridges are awful for both the Excelsior and for the Klingon bridge, where he's like up on the throne thing. Yeah, I think those are the cheapest looking bridges we see in the entire film series. But even they must have thought so because they built a whole new bridge in Star Trek 4 for both. You see the Excelsior bridge again, and when you see that Bird of Prey bridge, they have just different bridges with no explanation.
That's a good point. And I guess I just didn't really think about it that much when I was watching it this week. I was like, I don't know. I guess I just accepted it for what it is because I've seen it so many times.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about, the set as far as like a platform on which they're performing.
Sure.
You know what, Charles? The point you make is relevant because I have always felt, and when I saw it in the theater, the Wrath of Khan looks cheap compared to the motion picture.
Okay.
And not bad, but cheap. And to what you're saying, this is what happened. The motion picture cost so much money and didn't make as much as they wanted that when they brought in somebody like Harv Bennett, who didn't grow up on the series, he wasn't part of the series, they slashed the budget significantly for Star Trek 2 and 3. And it does show up in those sets to a certain extent.
Yeah, but I think the cinematography and the direction in Star Trek 2 is more cinematic, in 3 especially, but I think in a lot of cases even more so than the first one. I think that Nicholas Meyer did a fantastic job shooting that film, even on a TV budget.
Oh, absolutely. You kind of alluded to this, Chuck, but I want to talk about the Enterprise going down in flames.
Yeah.
And what a moment that was, especially, when you're watching this in 1984, that is unthinkable.
Yeah.
And it was such an emotional thing. And it's almost like the ship was like that extra character in the cast, It was like losing, I don't know, Rand or something, but this is their home. This is the thing that has been the most iconic and most identifiable element of this series from the very beginning. And here it is just burning and just, oh my gosh, that was an incredible moment. What a brave thing for them to do, I think.
Yeah, you go from Captain Kirk casting this look of longing in The Naked Time, where he looks at the Enterprise and says, never lose you. Almost like it's a lover, people said. To say this is, I will admit, I teared up again. I cried in theater when I first saw this. When the Enterprise, again, you got to remember, I've been watching this show every day for 12 years, and this was new to me. Nobody knew what was going on. Like I said, nobody knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
When that ship blew up, And I gotta say, those special effects still hold up. You can kind of see they're 80s, but they still hold up really well. And then you see that ship streaming across the sky. And then, as you were saying, Alan, he goes, "My God, Bones, what have I done?" I mean, good night.
And Mark
Oh
just
my
made
gosh.
that comment right there.
Yes.
It's such a moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
You did what you always do. You took whatever the line is, and turned it into a chance to live or something. I don't know.
You do what you all have to do, what you always do. You turn death into a chance to live.
Thank you. So Matt says that he hated the status screens on the Excelsior. They looked cheap and tacky.
Yeah.
Matt says Alan cried when Spock died. I cried when Enterprise was destroyed, and I wasn't even really a Trek fan yet.
Yeah.
I was. Yeah, exactly. It's such a moment in that whole.
It is.
No. Mark says the Enterprise was a member of the crew and that he cried.
Absolutely.
And then he also says now they destroy the Enterprise every other movie.
That's what I was thinking. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
You got it. It's lost the meaning now.
Well, on Next Gen, they used to destroy the Enterprise all the time, and it would be better at the end.
Hey, what was that one episode where it happened 4 times in the same episode?
Right.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah, and I will say that from the point that the Enterprise gets hit by the torpedo and they lose power, and the movie looks great from there on out. Like with the moodier lighting and the flashing lights, and then that sequence as they're on the sunset on the planet, watching the ship go down. And I love that it wasn't a warp core breach like we would think of it now. It was like the bridge exploded, and then the ship sort of crumbled, and when you watch it fall into the atmosphere. But I think it's narratively, I think it's needed because it was such a big deal to lose Spock on the first one, and now we're going to undo it. I mean, and basically, like, in order to get him back, Kirk loses his son and the Enterprise. Like, he gives up more than he lost to get Spock back. So I think that you got to have those kind of stakes, that, and I mean, losing David means a lot to Kirk. It doesn't mean as much to the audience because he was just introduced in the previous movie and he was kind of a prick in that movie. For the most of I mean, maybe there were David fans crying in the cinema when David got stabbed.
Nah.
I don't think so. But losing the Enterprise means a lot to the audience.
Exactly.
And it's like, how do you follow losing Spock at the end of the first one? You know what I mean?
Right.
Now the Enterprise.
And also, Charles, what I liked about what you were saying was I watched that. I rewound that 5 times. The Enterprise destruction, and the saucer section starts disintegrating. There are holes coming in it, and you see fires and stuff coming out. Now, if they had just overlooked the animator, which they did, the ship should have just blown up. But as you say, it looks great. And then when it starts drifting, and then the entire saucer section explodes. That still looks good for 40 years later.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I was going to comment on what Matt said about the displays. Matt, I agree, but I also remember the computer technology was new. I remember being in the theater going, "Wow, look at those screens. Those are awesome." Now they wouldn't even make a cheap video game screen, but at the time. One real quick, Yeoman Rand, or what was it? Commander Rand, was she?
Yeah, but I don't think she was even named.
No, she wasn't.
Even in the credits, she's like woman watching Enterprise or something. It's really just like an Easter egg for the fans that it's Tracy Whitney.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why she couldn't have been the lady in the transporter room with Mr. Adventure and Uhura come in with the others and get on the pad, and it's Rand who, that would have been a much more significant way to involve Rand. It would have given Uhura more to do later in the movie.
True.
I fixed the whole thing. There you go.
There you go, Alan.
You know what's worse though than her not being credited as Rand? I don't think she was credited as Rand for Star Trek 6. I think she was credited as Excelsior Communications Officer. I'd have to check, but from memory, I don't think that she was even credited as Rand there.
But hey, at least she was in the Voyager episode.
True.
Yeah.
Let's talk. Since we're toward the end of the movie at this point, let's just talk about the scenes on Vulcan with the High Priestess and the ceremony and the Katra and that exchange between Kirk and Sarek, and then Spock. There he is. That's just, that whole thing is just beautiful.
Yeah, and it's probably the best on-screen portrayal of Vulcan, in my opinion. And there's been a lot of them. But I think that one looks fantastic, and it's what I would think of as Vulcan.
You had a comment about.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say Chuck had a comment about the costumes when we were watching it.
Did I?
Yes.
What did I say? Was it good?
It was about Strange New Worlds.
Oh yeah, that they're the Vulcan costumes that like Sarek's wearing looks like the inspiration for the Vulcanoid costumes that they're wearing in Strange New Worlds when they turn into Vulcans in that preview clip. With the little
Okay.
gems on it. It looks like they based those costumes on Sarek's, but that is
Not related to the
not
movie.
really relevant.
Look, that's what I remembered. This is what you have me here for, is these weird random comments.
But I like them taking the bird of prey. I just really like them hijacking a bird of prey. That's just fun to see for the characters.
Yes.
And I like the visuals of it landing on Vulcan are fantastic.
Oh yeah, that looks so good.
All the Vulcan priestess and stuff, all the Vulcan stuff just works for me.
Except I'll tell you one thing. I had completely forgotten that she speaks Bible with all the and thou.
Yeah, but I mean you have Celia
it works
in the original series as T'Pau, and I mean that she's you would imagine a contemporary of T'Pau.
Yeah, it works though. I mean, and it looks spectacular. And I think Krug sets the template for all the Klingons after him. This sets the template for what Vulcan should look like, could look like, and when done properly, this is what it really, when they're portraying Vulcan on television, this is what it should aspire to.
What you said, Alan, is right, because that from the moment Kirk leaves, and again, Kirk being Kirk, I love Kirk when he picks up the freaking communicator and screams "Mults, Charlie Troop," whatever he knew it that fast and beams him up, and he sits in his chair and he says goodbye, David. That breaks my heart. His son's gone. And then I would tell you, DeForest Kelley, I looked at people's face. DeForest Kelley is doing a phenomenal job in this movie. Because he's confused. He's got another person in him. He's haggard. They put him in what they said the Federation funny farm at one point. That quick scene where he's talking to Spock in his quarters and he says, "I've missed you." Yeah. And I don't think I can bear to lose you. I got to say, that brought a tear to my eye. And then, as you said, then you see the ship and the music. Now, I was going to bring this up because a novelization of a movie should enhance and not change it. So I've read the novel Search for Spock. And then the novel, Charles, what you said, they said Sulu commented, the Federation does not build starships like the Klingons. And he said the flying of that bird of prey was like a plane. It was the aerodynamics of it. And the way it soared through the sky was just amazing. And to me, this is one of those movies where there are screenshots that I could put as a poster on the wall. The quick shot of Savick just standing there by himself. The look on Mark Leonard's face, trying to play a Vulcan, but not showing the emotion. It's just a beautiful scene. And to me, one of the scenes that to me will always be Star Trek is at the end when Kirk and Spock are facing each other. And you can make a frame where it's just those two facing. And when he finally does it's the ship. I love it. It's such an awesome thing with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as someone who complains on this show a lot about any time a starship is in the atmosphere, I will say the bird of prey does not bother me at all because it looks designed for it.
Yes.
It looks like it should fly into the atmosphere.
Absolutely.
It has wings, so it's aerodynamic. Yes. They move. It has landing struts. It doesn't. I'm not going to go on a tangent, but the bird of prey, I love that design. And it works really well in this movie. And I will say, we sort of skipped over it, but I'm going to backtrack for just a second and say Shatner's performance when David dies is a fantastic performance.
Oh, it's so good.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I bring this movie up to people who get stuck on the William Shatner overacts and speaks in a strange staccato way because he is on it. Like, one thing in the when he's speaking with the commander of Starfleet, and I always laugh when the guy says, "Jim, your life stands for rational thinking." Like, are you serious? Have you read the man's record? I mean, he's not insane, but
but he's a career military officer.
Yeah,
like going off to find Spock's dead body in the hopes of bringing him back to life or something doesn't make a lot of sense. You know what I mean?
But to me, that's Kirk, because remember the guy has more temporal violations than anybody in history. And also he went against Starfleet orders to save Spock in a mock time. So to me, it kind of sort of made sense. But I would tell you, I went with a bunch of friends, and honestly, everybody in the theater cheered in the movie when Sulu and Chekhov are standing there and he says, "The word, sir?" He said, "The word is no. I am therefore going anyway."
Yeah,
everybody's like, "Yeah, Kirk."
And you got to have the scene where he's like, none of you are obligated to come. And they're like,
yes,
let's go. you know?
Right.
Yeah, and I love that line, Charles, that where he says, I intend to recommend all of you for commendation in whatever fleet
we end up serving. That's right.
Yeah, because it's going to be the brig, brother.
I think that Shatner is in all the movies. I think Shatner is great in every one of them. But I don't know, man. This one, there's something special about what he does in this one.
Absolutely.
Maybe that whole emotional core between those two characters just resonated with him or something, but I don't know. But it just feels so real. Like everything that he goes through is so good. He's amazing.
Something else I thought was really good watching this again. I thought, and they were nonverbal other than yelling. I thought all the actors, there's 3 or 4 of them who played Spock, were excellent in terms of just how they look. Like when the Klingon was going to kill one of them at Crew's Commands, if you look at them, David is terrified, of course. Saavik looks like a Vulcan. She's kind of resolved. And then when he was obviously about to kill her, there's a little bit of a look on her face. But the guy playing Spock, he's completely blank. Why wouldn't he be? He has nothing. He has no brain. He doesn't know there's even danger coming. Even the little kid, the way he kept touching Saavik's face, like he's never seen that before. Also, did y'all notice when Spock came back at the end, he was walking, that Saavik looked down in embarrassment?
Yeah, or something.
It's always been said and speculated that's because of the Pon farr.
Sure.
Because
that makes sense.
And as a matter of fact, there was talk about her having gotten pregnant by Spock. But they showed that. Yeah.
There was talk of filming a scene that would indicate that. And I think some novels have picked that up. When I was a kid, I thought that touching your hands is how Vulcans had sex. And in the books, they didn't like to touch people. I thought that was why. And because Spock does the same thing with the Romulan commander, they do that. And I thought that was Vulcan sex, was touching your hands together.
Yeah,
that's
amazing.
Also, aliens, man, they can do it however they want.
Based on what I'd seen, that made sense to me.
Also, Alan and Charles, you guys talk about like ship porn and how you like the ships. One thing that I find very amazing, again, watching this in '84, let me tell you guys, nobody thought that the Bird of Prey and what was the ship, the Excelsior?
Excelsior.
Nobody thought those class ships were going to keep going and going in Star Trek for like ever.
Those models were very good investments for Paramount. Well, they got their money's worth out of those ships.
Yeah.
Right.
And
right. Speaking of Birds of Prey, I think the best ship porn in any of the movies is in 4, when the Bird of Prey materializes over the whaling ship.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dude, on the big screen, that was amazing. Holy cow.
We're almost out of time, but I want to mention their civilian outfits, because this is one of the few times up to this point where you see these characters in civilian clothes, and not like they went into the past and disguised themselves, but what's in their closet, you know?
Right.
I think that Kirk's outfit is fantastic.
Yes.
That suit is so flattering on him, but also it looks uniformy without being a uniform, because it's the reds and everything, but it's like a future business suit or whatever it is. But also you throw that leather jacket with a pop collar on top of it, and he just looks awesome.
Oh man.
I think Bones, his outfit really suits him. It's not as cool as Disco Bones from the motion picture, but I think it suits him. That you could see him wearing that. But they really did check off dirty.
What was he wearing?
Just like Pinocchio.
And Sulu had like this kind of cape thing that like Sherlock Holmes wore.
His like leather cape was awesome.
Yes.
He's wearing kimono, which is kind of stereotypical. But you throw that leather cape over it, and it's like, I want one of those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And real quick, speaking of Sulu, what the heck was up with that freaking security guard who's talking to a high-ranking officer when he said, "Don't get smart, tiny"? Then he gets his butt kicked later on. Like, what was his deal?
It doesn't make any sense, but it's satisfying to watch.
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
One real quick thing I want to mention, Charles. You mentioned, and I can't pronounce her name, who played T'Pau.
Stililovsky.
Right. Well, the actress who played Talar in
Dame Judith Anderson.
Judith Anderson. And I looked her up, and the first thing that Wikipedia said, Dame Judith Anderson, she has credits that go back to the 20s.
Wow.
It said she is still regarded as one of the finest classical stage actors of the 20th century. What a get for that role. I mean,
you said that, and then, but known for playing in Star Trek 3.
Right.
Of course.
Right.
And
But
one
she's
thing,
wonderful in it, though.
Oh yeah.
yeah. And one thing is real quick, because one thing I thought about back in the day was I was like, I didn't understand. One of the things people talked about was Spock transferred himself to McCoy in like 10 seconds. And then it took a long time. It took every Vulcan, because all the Vulcans were in a trance. But then I thought about that. And if you I hate to do this, if you put it in computer terms, Spock just dumped himself into McCoy. He just dumped a copy, and it was integrating with McCoy because McCoy was speaking his voice. So they had to sort that out. They had to kind of like pull it out and not kill McCoy. When McCoy goes, I accept the danger, he goes, a hell of a time to ask. And then they had to integrate that back into Spock. And then jumping ahead, of course, in Star Trek 4, they test him because they're like, let's make sure you really came back all the way. So I love that scene when Saavik and all the Vulcans were. And then I love that when she tells Sarek, she said, your request isn't logical. And I love that line, forgive me, but my logic escapes me where my son is concerned. I just love it.
And it's a brilliant move if you're going to do basically this whole movie without Spock in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
To have his consciousness being in McCoy. It's the perfect move. I mean, you get those wonderful scenes where it's basically like Spock McCoy hybrid, like they've been tubing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where's the logic in offering? You know what I mean?
It's his revenge for all the arguments he lost. I love it.
And he tries to nerve pitch somebody.
One last comment from Mark. He says, I like Captain Styles from the Excelsior. If I was a starship captain, I would have a swagger stick.
I want to find out if there was a functional use to that device. Like, is that something? Or is it just a swagger stick?
It is literally the old school kind of riding crop thing that commanders used
to. But I mean, in universe, is there some reason to have that device?
That was a little over the top, but of course, those of a certain age know that he played on Hill Street Blues at the time, so that was kind of a meta pick for him. So he was a little bit, he was just a little bit over the top. But it's funny. I still use that line to this day in real life, not even trying to. The more they overthink the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the drain. I mean, I've said that just last week in a meeting at work. I just love that.
And they make you happy to see the Excelsior defeated in like 2 or 3 scenes, even when it's just like, what, welcome, and he's like, up your shaft.
Yes.
The ship's obnoxious, and the captain's obnoxious. We can't wait to see them and leave them in the dust.
And Charles, you're talking about the use of the swagger stick. He kind of pokes Scotty with it when he goes, "Oh, I'm looking forward to breaking a few of the Enterprise's speed records tomorrow." And he kind of pokes him with it, and then he's sitting there doing the nail thing in the. I mean, he's really over the top, but it works.
Well, we've come to the end of our time. Does anybody have a final thought on this movie before we close it out?
It's great.
It is great.
It's a
fun movie.
It is my favorite of the original series, and I also think that. I think it's a good movie. Like Alan was saying, you come in there and Matt say it's a good movie. Mark Leonard is phenomenal. I think everybody does great. I just love it. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Keith, where can people find more of you?
You can find me on X and in Facebook, primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups.
And how about you, Alan?
CosmicCreative.com, KOZMIC Creative.com, where you can get links to Modern Musicology, which is my music podcast, and Doctor Who A to Z, which is I bet you could guess it, my Doctor Who podcast.
I was going to say alphabet. And how about us, Veronica?
Feltnerdy.com.
Yep. And if you're in the Atlanta area, you can see us in an adult performance on October 13th at the Red Light Cafe. That tickets are on sale now for that. You can look us up at Felt Nerdy and Dirty across social media, and that'll take you there. Or if you like the family-friendly stuff, you can follow us at Felt Nerdy, and we'll have some stuff coming up for that hopefully pretty soon. Yep. And then where else can people find us?
Monkeying Around, podcast about the monkeys.
Yep, where we have just completed an interview with Andrew Sandoval, who's one of the great monkeys archivists, and he's just released a new book from a guy named Joe Russo, who had basically the largest private collection of monkeys photographs in the world, has now been compiled into a book. He also talked to us about some upcoming projects for the monkeys that are in the works and some rumors. I basically at the end just started hitting him with all the rumors that I know of, and he was giving us answers. And
as much as he could.
It's going to be a good episode. We also just finished an interview with the director of a film called The Zombie Wedding, which stars, well, which has Mickey Dolenz in the cast as a British zombie DJ named DJ Cricket. So we talked to the director of that film, and he shared some stories with us about working with Mickey Dolenz and how Mickey Dolenz ended up in this movie. And so those are going to be the next 2 episodes of Monkeying Around. So you can follow that at Monkeying Around on your favorite podcast platform. And we're hoping to put some clips from those interviews out on our YouTube channel as well. All right, Veronica.
Excellent.
Moment of truth. Do you have a closing for us?
The ship out of danger?
That's perfect.
That works.
I want to
And
say
it's-
you saved the ship. Don't you remember?
All right, gang. We'll see. Do we know what we're doing next Thursday?
A podcast about Star Trek.
Okay, there you go. So everybody join us next Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern to find out what our topic is going to be. Everybody have a good week.
Take care.
Bye.